Carlos.
Your mother.
Yoko.
I mean, I would.
What is it called?
I don't know your mother, but I would.
Go to hell. And then Castro.
You're not a clock, though. I know you've wanted to be a clock your whole life, but you're not.
Guys on.
All right, let's do it. Yo, where's Yoko? Yoko, let's do this.
What?
All right, let's do this. Can I get a
Castro,
real
what are you doing? Castro, what was happening there?
You're on.
Welcome to the WatchTower. Oh, damn it, seriously. Mess up my flow, man. All right. Welcome back to the WatchTower Podcast, a new podcast brought to you by Towercast Network. Tower Productions.
Is it new?
Well, I mean, how many episodes are we in?
We're like 20-something.
A year later?
This is a year later. I mean, that's still pretty new, right? You watch a new show and it's in its first season and it's new, right? I mean,
yeah, it's new. It's new.
I don't know. Anyways, thank you for joining us. This is the film review podcast from Tower Productions. Very exciting episode today. I'm actually kind of nervous. I'm very nervous about this episode because I'm very nervous to hear the thoughts of my fellow panelists. We have, in no particular order, Mr. Christian Yokomoto Medina.
Oh, well, hello, fellows and fillettes.
And
Michael Delao.
hello, everyone.
And my fellow co-host, John Eric Castro.
Going on, film people.
Last but not least, we have Austin Young, making sure we're sounding good on the ones and twos.
The ones and twos.
Which at this moment he has his mic off, so
Yeah,
Hold on, I'm an idiot. Hold on.
I can already see the intro right now.
God damn it. Good thing
Hey,
you guys
I don't
couldn't
think
hear me.
Austin's been part of an intro, so there you go.
Yeah. There we go.
Good thing you guys couldn't hear me because I was like, they're ones and twos.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So I'm kind of glad I was muted and you guys couldn't hear me.
Okay.
But back to
That's our group.
Yeah,
Yo.
this is a very, if you've heard our podcast enough, you know that we're a very inconsistent bunch in terms of film taste. Which is great, which is what makes this podcast great. So I'm very curious to hear everybody's perspectives on, I don't want to say it's one of my favorite films of all time because I'd be lying.
Favorite Fellini?
But it's one of my favorite Fellinis. I heard Terry Gilliam say something today, and this is how I intro the film. Terry Gilliam, if you know him, he's a pretty fantastic director. Very experimental, very weird, but he's good. He says that about 8.5. It's not one of his favorite Fellini films, but it's the one that made the most impact on him. And I like to see it that way too. It's if you're a film director or if you're creative in general, this film is going to make an impact on you. We're doing Federico Fellini's 1963 film, 8.5. This is by far one of his most legendary films for various reasons, which we're going to get into. But it should come to no surprise to whoever's listening that it came to my attention because it's on Marty Scorsese's one of his top 10 favorite of all times. Like it's one of his all-time favorite films. So I've been running down that list over the past couple years. So I've seen things like Ashes and Diamonds and 8.5 and Red Shoes and just kind of like his list of favorite pictures. And like The Searchers is on there from John Ford. So like there's kind of a few different films. A lot of them are world cinema films, Italian, Polish, Russian. There's just a bunch of different films. So that's how I came across it. The first time I saw it, I was lucky enough to see it a digital projection at the Plaza Classic Film Festival in the Plaza Theater. And I didn't even see it on the main screen. They had it on the upstairs theater, which has a relatively smaller screen. But
still, we're able to
yeah,
see it
I saw it on the big screen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Saw it on the projector the first time. So I was really amazed. My wife went with me to that screening and she fell asleep, naturally so, because as you do with this film, because it's hard to get, man. It's tough. But without further ado, I want to hear your guys' first impressions. My assumption is I made you watch this film for the first time ever. So
yeah.
I liked it, man. I really liked how in the face it is, like in your face.
In your face. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
But did you guys watch it together?
Yeah.
I need to do that next time with you guys, man, because I was lost.
No. Even watching it together, like I mean, we like to have our little movie night, and
all I can think of is like how is this what's going on in your head, Carlos?
Look,
this is what.
Look, the Lao's first thing was like, and I don't want to speak for you, the Lao, but you said something along the lines of like, I'm gonna see it again before the podcast recording, and kind of rightfully so. I've heard a lot of like even Terry Gilliam said that you catch a lot more things on the second time around.
Yeah,
so,
like the.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that the intro really like. I mean, it stood out a lot more than the beginning. At the beginning, it's like, okay, we're gonna be a weird art house film, nice.
Yeah,
but then like you watch it the second time around, and it's almost like it captures the entire emotion of what the film's gonna kind of be at the very beginning. And I'll get more into it, but like honestly, it was just it
was a lot.
If you know me, I just get mad at Carlos whenever he shows his films because it's always this thing that breaks me because I don't understand, and then he explains it like, "Oh, it's this," and it's just so stupid, you know.
And imagine you saw it with him. I saw it with
no. Like, here's what happened. Like, I would go to the restroom, or Austin would go to the restroom, or one of us would have to leave, and it would just be me and like Carlos, and then it's just like, I don't understand. It's just, like,
please don't hit me.
They're real, right? And he's like, I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they are. It's just like, damn it.
I'm not going to give it away until we have a discussion right at the end.
I know, but
I even asked Fellini, you know, like, can you interpret these type? And he's like, no, like, I don't.
Oh yeah, that's the key thing about Fellini. Fellini never liked answering those questions.
And I saw from his interviews because he said that it's kind of like a creature that he creates, and once it's released,
yeah. I mean, look, think about this. Think about this kind of linear kind of connection, right? David Lynch, everybody knows David Lynch and David Lynch films, right? Weird as fuck to say the least. David Lynch claims that says that this is his favorite film of all time, number one.
Yeah, I could see.
Number two, Lynch himself has kind of borrowed from that feeling, right? Like when you ask Lynch about the meaning of his films, he's not going to answer it, or he's going to answer it very sarcastically, like just to throw you off. Like, because
do you like that as a director? Like, do you want get into the heads, or they're just like, I'm not going to give you guys anything?
I like doing that as a director of my films, but as a fan of Fellini and Lynch, and you know, I don't like to hear that. I want to hear what's in their brain, right?
Exactly.
It drives me crazy. But anyway, sorry. Let's keep going down the line. Yoko, what were your kind of first? I'm curious with yours, Yoko, because you had a reference film that you had seen first that was based on this film. So I'm really curious about your take on it.
I've seen the. Well, I actually own it. Damn it, I forgot to bring it for show and tell.
Oh,
but the
show and tell. I did bring mine. I brought mine for show and tell, but we'll get into that.
But yeah,
I brought a flashlight.
The musical 9, which stars. What's
Musical
Lincoln's
9.
name?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Lincoln.
Which stars him as Guido.
Yeah.
And it's directed by Rob Marshall, the Chicago director.
Yeah.
And
there's a musical, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is a musical.
Interpretation, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and so it's basically kind of a loose interpretation of this movie.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I do like this movie in ways. I don't like them in other ways. But the same problem that I had mostly with 9, it's the same problem that I have mostly with this one.
Oh.
Who gives a fuck about what's going through Guido's mind?
Yeah.
I didn't care anything about what happens to Guido. That honestly loses me when I'm going through the film.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the end when I actually kind of like got more with him and everything. But I'm actually more interested in the rest of the stories, especially with the women around him.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because I kind of feel like the producers in the movie, I kind of feel like I'm one of them.
That's cool.
And so I'm like, I don't want to sound like him, but like I get they're kind of antagonistic in a way. But I'm like,
well,
I'm like, but I don't care about this guy.
I love that. No, I love that because it's meant to provoke thought, and that's Fellini's whole point. Like Fellini's intent with every single one of his films. If you've seen La Strada or La Dolce Vita or Nights of Siberia, they're some of my favorites of his, and they're meant to be thought provoking. And what I love about your interpretation, Yoko, or your opinion, is that a lot of people, especially early on when they reviewed this film, they wanted to communicate the fact that you shouldn't be cheering for Guido. He's a piece of shit. And, you know, not just to the women, but just in his life to everybody who's trying to make his vision come true. He's kind of an asshole. So I love that you're saying that, because that's a really open, honest, like, kind of rebuttal of like, well, why do I care if you're an asshole? Like, why am I going to follow you around for 2.5 hours or whatever, right? So that's interesting. I'd love to get more into that.
Doesn't that kind of go into like the whole, I mean, film theory thing that I think we've just all been conditioned that if we're introduced to anybody, we automatically want to assume they're going to be the protagonist and they're going to kind of be like the good guy in the situation. I mean, not to get too derailed or anything like that, but I remember that feeling with like Locke, where like when you see him, he's this guy, like he's the only person you're really like introduced to. So you just want to think, oh, he's a good guy going through like his own like hero's journey. And then you get the idea that like, no, he made mistakes and now he's like destroyed.
That's the thing. That's what I love about like cinema and when we get deeper into, you know, more, I hate using this term because it sounds pretentious, but more serious films. That's just the best way I can put it. When you get into more serious films, you start realizing that they're not all hero films. There's the anti-hero and there's not all superhero films, and you're not always supposed to root for the guy. However, let me give a little bit of background to whoever's listening. Federico Fellini's 8.5 is this surrealist comedy drama. Yes, it is a comedy, oddly enough, comedy drama film. The reason it's called 8.5, it's not
the seventh film ever made.
Yeah, it's not super like deep or anything. It was Fellini's 8.5 film. He considers half because up until that point he had made 7 features and he co-directed a feature with somebody else. So this would be his 8.5 film. So that's the only reason this is the title. And it's oddly, this is how much of a genius Fellini is, in my opinion, because it's oddly super meta. So what a lot of people analyze with this film is that the film they were making was 8.5 because Federico Fellini, he openly said that his alter ego is Guido. Like he's openly said that, like that's kind of like born out of himself, right? So his alter ego is Guido, and 8.5 was the movie that they were making in the movie. And then just how awesome is that?
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
And so the title is just perfect for like, just for the film and for like the logistical reasons, but for the name of the film, it's just fucking awesome to me.
Yeah, and you could feel that whenever people would kind of tell him, or I remember at the beginning when they would tell him like it's too abstract and there's no real premise and people aren't going to be able to latch on to like the central conflict, like what's his deal and all this kind of like metaphors have no cohesion, like what are you really trying to do? And then you watch the film and it's that exact thing, but it's almost like this weird kind of meta internal critique on what's happening. And
it's cool that people, I'm okay with people that watch this film and feel confused. You're supposed to. That's the point. In fact, so much so that before the name 8.5 came into fruition, Fellini was going to call this film The Great Confusion. That's what the title was going to be. This is on purpose. You're inside the brain of a filmmaker. Look, here's the thing. So the film is about Guido. He's a recognized director in Italy who's making his next film. He already has his cast and crew gathered. He has his financier kind of pushing him because nobody has heard a single thing about this film. And it's not because he's a genius. It's because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And he's trying just to kind of lead people on and say, no, we're good. Everything's good. Don't worry about it. But he's going through what Fellini called director's block, right? A writer goes through writer's block. The reason Fellini made this about a director is because he felt like a writer was going to be too boring. There's not much action when it's just a writer and his typewriter, but when there's a director in the middle of a crew and there's cast and there's producers and there's news reporters coming at him, there's some action that he could play with, right? So Fellini had the intention of making this film because it happened to him. That's how meta it is. Fellini has this philosophy about creatives, especially about film directors, that after about 10 years from the moment of their first success, they start getting repetitive after 10 years.
Oh.
So he had this philosophy about directors, and he named like a bunch of directors that his predecessors, right? That came before him. He talks about how, look, man, these are all the examples. The first 10 years of their films were fucking genius and creative and unique. And then after the 10th year, they start just repeating themselves. And that could be true, right? For a lot of filmmakers, and for other filmmakers, it's definitely not, right? But so he felt like that was about to happen to him. This was his 8th film, right? And he's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And he already had the sets built. He already had exactly what happened in 8.5. He already had it happen to him. Like everything was ready. He had casts, and he was writing a letter to Angelo Risoli, whose company named Cineris was going to distribute and finance his next film. They had such a big success with La Strada. La Strada is a massively successful film for Fellini that they were going to finance his next film. And Fellini was like getting ready to throw in the towel. He was writing a letter to the producer saying, "Hey man, I can't do it. I don't have anything. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to quit." And then he had a thought. He had this epiphany, right? Well, why not make a story about that? A director who has director's block and doesn't know what he's going to do next. And that's it. He tore the letter in half and threw it away, and he started writing 8.5. So that's the background of the film and kind of where it's about. Like I said, I didn't bring my show and tell. My wife is awesome. She got me my Criterion collection of all the essential Fellini films. Wow. It's like 12 films, I think, or more. And I've ran through like 2/3 of them. But it's in here. 8.5 is in here. It's Criterion. And if you're weird like me, you also have the single one because I bought this before my wife bought that pack. But it's got a cool little booklet inside telling you like a bunch of stories about, the making of the film. And then the pack, by the way, has this guide to the films, right? Guide to the films. And in there, you see the 8.5 section, which gives you a little bit of like of an opener of what the film is supposed to be and what happens. Last but not least, I got a lot of like what I'm going to talk about and where I got some. So don't worry, I did research, Castro. Like I want to know more too because it's fucking crazy, right? Scorsese wrote this article. I've been talking about it called Scorsese on Fellini, The Lost Magic of Cinema. And I just want to kind of open up the conversation with this. Scorsese says, for me, the audience with the Cardinal embodies remarkable truth about 8.5. Fellini made a film about film that could only exist as a film and nothing else. Not a piece of music, not a novel, not a poem, not a dance, only a work of cinema. That's the only way this film was able to exist as its meta version of film. So I just wanted to open it up with that because I thought that was a cool little excerpt. But yeah, man, everybody's been trying to analyze this guy since the 60s, and you can't. That's the point. You just can't. It's self-interpretive about how you take it.
Like, I feel that during that era and earlier eras, people were obviously getting very experimental. I mean, we all took like a cinema history kind of classes and like looked at what they were doing before.
It was a revolution. It was a revolution.
There was a lot of that coming out, but it was surprising to me like how far they would kind of reach in this experiment because I almost feel like now people do that because resources are a lot easier to get a hold of and they can kind of do whatever they want to do and they don't have to have as much of a repercussion. But then it seems like you're going to have people around you. You're going to have a lot of people helping you with no guarantee that this experiment's really going to go anywhere. And the fact that it was made during like the 60s, right?
Yeah, it was a 60s.
Yeah, it feels like way ahead of its time as far as the subject matter, the way everything's presented. Even that I go back to the opening scene and some of the more surrealistic shots. All of it just feels so beyond.
I will say this: I knew that opening scene was gonna get Delal's attention. Like I knew because that's his jam. Is like these.
Just a bunch of random like images coming at you with sounds and like I'll be honest. When I had to rewatch it again today, I just kept going back and looking at like that scene like probably 3 or 4 times. I didn't get to finish the movie for a second watch, but that part it just really caught me. And then
so the opening opens up with literally with a traffic jam. And Fellini wanted to do this thing where he puts his character in an everyday situation that makes him feel like he's suffocating. So that traffic jam scene, that's all it is. It's like, imagine being on the way to set, right? Like
it's a perfect representation of what it is to have a panic attack.
Okay, see, I was in that last then. That's what I was thinking too.
There you go.
And that's what it is, right? Like imagine being Guido or director or writer or whatever you are, and you're on your way to set. And even I think as an actor, guys are like, you're on your way to set and you're like, man, I still haven't figured this character out. I don't know how I'm going to play him. I don't know who this is going to be. And he's suffocating. It's a panic attack. That's absolutely right, Yoko. Like 110%. And then you have this this representation of what I call the kite scene, right? Out of body experience, right? Like you see just a foot tied around the rope, almost like a kite. And that's kind of like, I mean, it could be interpreted a million ways, right? But to me, I just see that like he's too far gone. We're barely holding on to him type of deal.
Okay.
Like his crew around him is like, where's he at? Like, is he in the clouds because he's passionate about this project, or is he lost, or we don't know anything about what's in his head right now?
I almost got the idea of it's like the torture of a creative, I guess, kind of like you were saying, like an actor or director, all the the film crew basically, where there's that suffocating feeling, like him being inside traffic jam, but the fact that all eyes are kind of on him, and he could be doing well, he could be failing, but everybody's staring at him, and it doesn't like nobody's gonna go out there and help him. Nobody's gonna go out there and change him. Like they're just there waiting, and then he gets moments of kind of this creative freedom, going out like dreaming. But then you can only dream so far before somebody's gonna reel you in and be like, oh, when's the next picture? Like, what are we doing? And all that kind of stuff, and having to force you back into the shell of being like a film producer. And then that kicks off the story of then people starting to talk to him and people starting to go at him. So I just feel like
you and I have had this conversation in the past few months, that like you and I have been going through it. I know you went through it a little bit before I did, and then I kind of started going through it recently. Where artists have this thing called it goes by a bunch of names, but mostly it goes by the imposter syndrome or the fraud syndrome. And imposter syndrome is just like, we all know what this is, right? Like I ain't shit. You know what I mean? Like I'm nobody. I don't deserve to be in this because I'm not good at it. I'm bad at it, or I'm not recognized or whatever, right? So I think every artist is intention is like to not get so deep into that hole. Right. So I feel like Guido is kind of part of that. Like he's already successful. He's already made it. But as we've talked about on this podcast, a lot of directors never feel like they make it. And that's what drives them to make a better film each time. Right. So I think as creatives, we all go through that. And Guido is definitely going through that in this film. But what the intention of 8.5 is not only to show you the brain of a creative in its most active function, but to show you the fact that you're already going through this. And then your personal life comes and fucking shits all over you, right? Because Guido goes through his filmmaking kind of suffering, and then his wife and his mistress, and the friendships he's developed, and going back to his hometown and dealing with the clergy and dealing with like his upbringing as a Catholic kid. And it's everything all together in one thing. And it's just crazy. And that's kind of right. It's a lot. But I was scared to show you guys this film. I've said this to you guys off camera or whatever, that I didn't know if to toss you into the abyss with 8.5, because after 8.5, every other Fellini film will be a walk in the park, in my opinion. La Strada is an easier watch. Dolce Vita is an easier watch. Nights of Siberia is an easier watch. I Vitellioni, which is one of my new favorites of his, is an easier watch. Let me put it to you this way. La Strada is just about a newly married couple, abusive husband. They're traveling circus. Kind of easy to follow. La Dolce Vita is about a news reporter, a journalist who falls in love with a beautiful American actress, easy to follow. I Vitellioni is about 4 friends from a small town and they all want to get out of that town. Easy to follow. But this one, 8.5, is just his most, creative, I don't know, weird work. But
I mean, it jived with me, but I mean, I'm also the kind of person who really likes a film that is out there as can be, and doesn't want to give you any kind of like I guess kind of branches to hang on to. Like it's just so you're free falling through it. I mean, I enjoy the Lynch and random things popping out, and then spending like the next 5 weeks trying to like understand why it popped out. Like so with this one, I could appreciate that kind of intention, and I mean it's in. Like you're talking about this being something special beyond it just being a good film, but being a part of cinema and something that it can only be in cinema because you can't put this in other places. And that's what I appreciate about this. Like
Austin DeLao and I have this running meme that we talk about. David Lynch, I guess at one point said, Pay attention to the donut, not the hole.
Yeah.
Anytime we watch
Good one.
a weird existential film, that's what, like, he's not wrong, you know, like
Yeah.
In the hole, there's another hole. It's a donut hole.
Oh man,
Castro, I want to hear from you, man. I want to hear about your emotions through this film. Yes, you didn't get it,
oh
but
man, I don't
what were
even
you
know what to say,
experiencing?
dude.
like, what
Okay,
were you
okay.
experiencing in
No, no.
this?
Wait. I want to kind of. Here's what I want to understand, and I guess maybe like the questions might help. Were you going into this, and I guess do you go into movies normally focusing on the acting and what's kind of being done, or do you kind of do a watch through focusing more on the story and then try to think back like,
See,
oh,
I was thinking of doing that, but this one you have to read a lot, so you really can't focus on the little nicks that the
Mhm.
that's
actors are
true.
doing.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah. Subtitles. Mhm.
But I don't know, man. I just like I said, man, I have to watch it with you guys because I kept getting lost. So if someone doesn't direct me, you know, it's kind of
There was a weird moment that I'm pretty sure you were thrown off with, like I was thrown off with, and all of us, where I think Guido's like at his home or something like that, or he's in bed, and then off to the side is like a lady like cleaning a wall.
oh yeah,
Yeah, and then it just like cuts, and then it's like a lady cleaning a window, and
acting weird, yeah. And then
Yeah,
she just walks
and
away,
for
and then she's
us,
like,
we were in this weird kind of like, what the hell like was that? And we were all like impressed that it was like a visual J cut
Transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that was pretty good, yeah.
it was good, but it's definitely one of those films that, I mean, the first time you're trying to go through it, there are things that there's too much to focus on. I mean, you're trying to focus on.
Guide me through that then. Guide me through that one scene.
Okay,
Is
here's the thing,
because he just slept with his mistress and then
Don't expect to go through this film, first of all, understanding it, especially not in this first viewing. I'm on the third viewing, and I'm still picking up things that are crazy to me, right? But let's talk about the scene. That visual J cut that I kind of talked about, I knew it was coming because I remembered it, right? But I was telling Austin that not only that, but you got to remember, the film opens up after the first scene. The film opens up with Guido. We discover that he's doing this cleanse basically because he's sick, right? He's going through this, like, there's doctors in his room, and you can kind of see him almost like in a feverish state. And he, you know, knowing that, again, we talked about that, like, kind of with Locke, right? Like, this is like how his body is reacting to the stress of the fact that he's about to go film, right?
I love that, yeah.
So we kind of get to, that's my interpretation. Again, it's all, I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but this is my interpretation. We get there, right? So we kind of see him through this feverish state. When he's sleeping with the mistress, when he spends the night, and we start seeing this woman, right? The mistress gets sick.
Yeah.
Right? And she's in a feverish state, and it's like this intense thing for Guido. And I just think it's almost like the way I interpret that J cut. Number one, I think it's just a cool way to transition. I think Fellini was being a director, and whatever.
A lot of that, yeah.
Yeah, he was just being a director.
Talks about it in the interview, where it's like, no, sometimes you guys are expecting the magical. No, I'm just doing the professional, and then sometimes
he's just trying to make a cool film, right?
Exactly,
like at the base of it, right? So that's one. Number two, I think it's the passing of time, right? So in Guido's head, from the moment he closes his eyes to the moment he opens them, he's already bombarded with a million questions about what's going on with the film. So I think his sleeping time, we're experiencing it the way he does. All of a sudden he's in bed with his mistress, and then he's seeing the fucking hotel cleaning. You know, I think it's just like the passing of time. Like, we don't experience it. Like, usually you'll go to a black screen. It's a breath of fresh air for the audience. We get to kind of calm down. Yeah. But in this case, it's like, nope. So you went to sleep.
Especially the era of films, that's what you would see the most.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're used to that, and it gives us a breath of fresh. It's like when you see Uncut Gems, right? It's 2.5 hours or 2 hours of paranoia and anxiety until the gunshot, right? And then, so it's supposed to like make you go through that journey to put you on Guido's feet, right? So that's my interpretation for that one particular scene.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. It could just be a cool scene, and we're fucking getting it, like he says.
This is what's gonna happen. This is what's gonna happen during the episode. We're all gonna be like, yeah, that was.
See, that makes sense for sure.
We're allowed to call each other out. Like, we're allowed to say, hey, it's bullshit because I didn't see that. I didn't feel that way. That's fine. I know
this is one way to look at it, at least.
This is beating around the bush, and I'll acknowledge that right now because it's very hard to look at it and try to like say that moment that was cool because of this. I know, Castro, you're always like, I like talking to you guys because you seem to like know those little elements and all that. This one, none of that happened. None of that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, one of them kind of were like, it kind of like redirected me or whatever. It kind of like put me back. Was where that lady's dancing and the kids are looking at her. I was dude. I was like, oh my god.
So that
my film.
I mean, with a lot of the scenes, I was trying to understand if that actually happened or if it didn't happen, and then he comes back, and I almost want to believe that a lot of what's going on in the film is not what really is happening in his life.
It's confirmed. No, that part is confirmed. That half of the film is the reality is Guido's reality as he's going through the motions of making a picture, and the other half of the film is his fantasies and his flashbacks. That much is confirmed. Yeah, so you can talk about, for instance, the flashback scene of I forget her name, Savarina or something, right?
Probably
something like that.
Savarina or something, right? And when we got to the flashback of that, the only thing that kicked off this flashback was the fact that he was going to be talking to a priest.
Yeah.
Right? About the making of his new picture and how it kind of has to do with his background. Yeah. And it kicked off the flashback of him getting in trouble with the priest and his mom, and how that moment, like, think about the existential portion of the mom, right? We see the mom in the flashback, and then we see her again a few times after that.
Yeah.
Because he never got over the fact that she was disappointed in him. Because of that.
With like Lynch films, I've learned to understand that when you're going and experiencing the film, if you're trying to thread it like, oh, well, this point happened and then this point happened chronologically, like it's not meant to flow that way. It's meant to flow the way, like they call it dream logic.
Yes.
But we've all had moments where something, either a smell or the sight of something, just triggers a memory.
Yes.
And it puts you into that place. And for a while, you're not fully like memorizing that moment and all the details. You're memorizing this kind of weird molding of like,
holy shit, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, like what's happening to you right now and what's happening then. And that's like with the lady like washing the window, or like a lot of those weird transitions. It's kind of like something happens mildly, but it's enough to trigger that. And then plus, you look at those flashback sequences, they're very much in the dream logic vein, where I don't imagine that a bunch of priests and like the mother would just be like, how could this happen? That's terrible. Oh my God. But
it's his memory of it.
Yeah. In his mind, he remembers there just being a lot of people, and that everywhere he turned, it was disappointment everywhere he turned.
But and then that's the life of an artist, right? Like you go through it thinking that your parents are going to think they're proud of you because of what you're doing. And even he had this very weird fantasy dream scene where his parents, his dad and his mom, he's having a conversation with them. And then when he's done having a conversation with them, he helps them back into the grave.
Yeah.
Because they're dead. And it's almost like his visual like interpretation of his dreams, right? Check this out. It says, when 8.5 was released, people argued over it endlessly. The effect was, I'm glad that we're connecting this way, because this is what happened originally.
Yeah.
We each had our own interpretation, and we would sit up till all hours talking about the film, every scene, every second. Of course, we never settled on the definite interpretation. The only way to explain a dream is with the logic of a dream. And that's what Delao was saying. Like, you can't explain, when you're explaining a dream, you have to a friend or to your girlfriend or to your wife or whatever. How do you just explain it with the fact?
It's weird. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but with Ash lately, she's been memorizing, like, or she remembers her dreams, and she's like, like trying to like get better sleep and all that, but she memorizes her dreams. And it's funny to see how and I've had that too, when you try to explain things in the dream, everything makes absolute sense. When you think about it in terms of like, this triggers this idea and this triggers this idea, where they don't have to be connected in reality. Like it makes so much sense. But then when you try to break it down in like real, or like here in visuals, it seems so obscure. But like, if you think about it, like
his crew, his crew on shooting this film, and you're going to trust, I mean, he was already a genius at that point to a lot of people, right? So they'd follow him into the depths of hell. That's what a lot of people in the interview say. Like he was Fellini, he was the Italian.
It didn't matter if you didn't understand.
Yeah, but
like Lynch
crew watching this thing, and you're like, what do you mean we're gonna shoot a fucking woman dancing in the middle of the street while kids like they're not gonna get it, and that's kind of the beauty of it too. Like,
he
didn't know this was gonna be the masterpiece he'd be remembered for, quote unquote. What I love about 8.5 is that 8.5 has this really cool, obviously dreamlike substance to it, but it's the only film that's appreciated, not the only, but it's the film that's revered by creatives and filmmakers, whereas his other films are revered just as a classic cinema director by everybody else. Like 8.5 is the one, it's like the underground film. It's like the film that like we're talking about because we're filmmakers.
Yeah, we've experienced that. I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, watching this, we don't understand all the little like bits and pieces and all that, but we've all experienced people wanting us to be creative and us having to kind of just go out there and perform. Castro probably more than most. And you go on a stage and you perform. It doesn't matter if you're an actor, director, whatever you are. You go out and you perform. And if you're ready or not, people are gonna watch. And
if you're a film director and you tell me you don't feel like every time you go on set, you have to almost put on this hat, put on this mask.
You the beautiful part, but the challenge.
It's a beautiful. Yeah, you're right. It sucks, right? Because
it's half and half for sure.
Yeah, you've talked about that, Castro. Just like when you would go and they'd air your film or you'd like watch it like on the screen. You don't want to look. You don't want to be there. Just kind of like.
I'm hating myself for doing that.
Exactly. And it's that. It's all of us. Like. It's weird how we get that, though we're making something to show other people, we would hope that nobody has to look at it like right there and then. Like, we just kind of want to like back away.
I want to dive a little bit into Yoko's interpretation of the film because, one of the things that makes this guy who he is, whether you admire him because he's a film director and everybody fucking honors him, or you think he's a piece of shit as a human being, right? Whatever camp you're on, or you're right in the middle, you're right, whichever camp you're on. Guido has a wife who's out traveling while he's making his next picture. And then he has a mistress that comes and visits him, visits him on set. And he purposely like books a hotel away from the cast, away from the crew, this kind of small little dainty hotel. And she kind of has full service and stuff like that. But you can tell that she's like just this gold digger almost, right? Like she doesn't really have any purpose there. At first you think she's an actress, but she's not. At first, she's a beautiful woman, right? But I want to talk a little bit about that because one of the scenes that I caught this time around that really put things in perspective for me this time around, I appreciated it a little more was which one?
The harem scene?
Yes. Well, or what we know as the harem scene, right? So okay. We see
Context.
We see a flashback of young Guido being pampered by several women in his life as a kid, right? They bathe him at the big barrel that the kids are bathing in is wine, by the way.
Yeah.
It's wine. Really? So they bathed it. Yeah.
It
was an Italian tradition, especially like if you could afford it. It's almost like kids nurture themselves this way through wine. Like it was this thing. So
that's why it tastes funny. Okay.
You'd bathe your kid in wine and then you'd wrap them in like these very clean, white, nice linens. And then you'd lay them to bed, right? Like it was like being pampered. So mind you, Guido was being pampered by we don't know who these women are, at least in the beginning as a kid, his mother, aunts, grandmother, whatever. Right. But he's pampered by women and women only, right? I think that speaks to the fact that, number one, you got daddy issues, right? We don't see, we don't see it in the upbringing. We only see the conversation he has with his father, right?
Yeah.
We don't really see the upbringing. Who's to say that him speaking to his father is like the father he never met, right?
Well, I mean, if you also think about it, like the people who are supposed to be the father figure, the padres, and like all the people that are around him, and like especially Catholicism, the Catholicism, like that's what you're fed, that these are the people you look to for guidance and advice. Right. And the only real time we see their interactions, it's with this disappointment and always asking them like, does this
judging like this? It's called Catholic guilt.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hanging around here right now, but like they ask him like, are you sure this film is not touching these themes, or is this bad, and all that kind of stuff. And it's like you'll never find that acceptance, but that's the only type of really father figure you see in the film,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
It's
So
crazy.
I think we get on this scene, and then we have the reimagining, the actual fantasy side of Guido's brain. We go into him fantasizing literally about all the women that he's encountered on his shoot, his wife, his mistress, the actresses, the hair makeup people, like every woman that he's encountered, the contortionist that like is weird but is there for some reason. You know, like all of these people that are in his film or involved in this film, they're there, or in his personal life.
Yeah.
They're there pampering him instead of giving him hell. And that's such a misogynistic thing to think.
Yeah.
It's such a misogynistic like fantasy, right? All the women in my life are gonna there to be servicing me, and it's this fantasy, but it's I feel like it's almost an escape. It's an escape to Guido of like, imagine if there was a world where I didn't have to fight with all these women and I could just be happy and they could be there to service me. I'm not saying it's right.
And
I'm not saying it's justified.
And even in his fantasy, he gets shit from the women.
His fantasy ends up crashing. And that's kind of the weird part. That's how you know it's like, oh shit, like I can't even have a good time in my fantasies. Like imagine being in those shoes, right? Like you're trying to escape, you're just trying to have a daydream, and you can't even successfully have a daydream because you know it's not realistic. Like it just comes crashing down for him. So yeah, I caught that a little more. Like he was flashbacking to his childhood that obviously didn't translate into adulthood because of modernism, right? The big thing about 8.5 and like Federico Fellini and Italian directors in the 60s, and a little early on, like Roberto Rossellini and stuff, they were revered because of their modernism of cinema, how they modernized cinema and how we can do a little bit more realistic, more gritty stories unapologetically. It's the reason why, like I was watching a film and a documentary on a trip to the moon, right? And how the reason why, you know, the big reason why George Méliès failed is because he didn't want to catch on with the times. He was making silly pictures, you know, he's making silly comedy pictures, silent films that weren't catching on with the times. And these filmmakers revolutionized that. And I'm telling you, man, it's a domino effect, because you have guys like the George Méliès and the Charlie Chaplins and the Buster Keatons inspire the guys like the Fellinis and the Rossellinis and the, you know, and the John-Luc Godards and the Agnes Vardas. And then those guys inspired the Coppolas and the Scorseses and the Spielbergs and the De Palmas. And then those guys inspired the guys that we kind of revere now, right? The Ari Asters and the Chris Nolans and the Wes Andersons. So it really is a domino effect. And the modernism that Italian pictures presented revolutionized cinema in that way, where we can tell serious films unapologetically with nudity, with cursing, with sexuality and adultery and what have you. And it all makes sense. There's a reason for all of it, right?
Refer to Cinema Paradiso.
Yeah, right. The Catholic Church putting a damper on creativity, right? And censorship. And it all has to do with everything. And the reason I bring that up is because I just want to connect this thorough line, because if I never get to present another Fellini film again, because you guys are like, nah, dude, no more, I want to connect this thorough line here.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church and the Catholic guild aspect, you should know by now, Fellini was obviously a massive influence on Scorsese, not just because he was Italian, but because of the Catholic guilt stuff. If you know anything about Scorsese, and especially his early films, if you saw Mean Streets, just Mean Streets, you don't have to see anything else. As long as you saw Mean Streets, you saw the Catholic guilt of the protagonist and how he wanted to kind of go into the priesthood, but he also fell in love with the girl and the neighborhood, and he doesn't want to let go of his neighborhood friends. And that's what Mean Streets is about, is like, well, do I want to do what God is telling me to do and honor my church and honor my upbringing, or do I want to explore and do other stuff? And in every single film of Scorsese's, like especially Silence and The Departed starts off with like Catholic imagery. Yeah, and like it's all about
Altar
Catholic
boy and
guilt,
all that.
and like so it's all about Catholic guilt and like what Scorsese went through, because Scorsese was going to be a priest before he became a filmmaker. And it was a priest who loved cinema that started telling Scorsese, hey, look, check this movie out and check this movie out and check this movie out. And he finally told Scorsese, like, hey man, you should probably get out of here. You can make films. Go make films.
Oh,
You know, so I just wanted to connect that thorough line between like Fellini and the Catholic guilt and the Catholic upbringing and background
Makes
to where
sense.
like modern filmmakers, like you even see it in The Godfather, man. Like Coppola was very influenced by this type of style of cinema. And, you know, for The Godfather, at least, and the conversation and for all these pictures. So I just
Something we have
wanted
to take into account is that, especially these are all basically kind of like Italian heritage directors.
Sure.
And I mean, Italy, you're gonna have a huge Catholic background, especially at that time.
Ooh.
And that you could see that reflected.
There's a film, I forget if it's La Dolce Vita or if it's Roma, but the opening scene of one of those two Fellini films, I forget which one it is, I think it's Roma, is literally a helicopter helicoptering a Jesus Christ statue into the church. And it's just like everybody, it's like this big event that people know that this statue is going to be delivered and it's going to be, you know, there to worship or what have you. And it's this big event. It's what Rome was, and that's what Italy was. And to this day, how many people gather around when there's a new pope? You know, and you know, any
or even if the Pope just comes out, you know, for a second to say hi. Yeah.
How many people? I mean, thousands of people, right? They gathered in the courtyard or what have you. So yeah, I just think there's a huge foundation of that in this, and the scenes with the priest. Like, isn't it crazy to humanize a priest? I know that sounds crazy, but in this film, we see the spa scene, right? Right, the what we're talking about. So the spa scene. And how there's almost like a voiceover of the priest that he's going to go talk to, but we get to humanize him. He's out of his robes. He's in a towel. He's chilling. He's having a conversation. And then he, like, even Guido gets like an announcement on the overhead speakers or whatever, right? That his highness is ready to see you now or whatever, right? It's crazy how daring that is, especially for those times. Like, you don't see it. You don't think of a priest that way. You don't think of a father hanging out in a, you know what I mean? Like, so I just, that scene particularly was pretty interesting this time around.
So one thing I want to point out with this movie, what I liked about this movie was I did like the kind of a little bit of like fantasy approach to it, especially towards the end. Like, I do. One of the things that one of my favorite events of the film is at the end. Especially with
we gotta talk about that.
The moment he pulls the plug on himself, metaphorically, and well, at least
I think
talk about that. What's your interpretation of him shooting himself? What is that to you?
So for me, it's kind of like a culmination of this thing of, well, he's been basically having a nervous breakdown throughout the whole movie, throughout the making of his film. Right, going from one step to the other, like then managing his personal life as well. He's just going on a complete breakdown. So at the very end, when they're supposed to shoot the big final act, but at the same time he has these round table of reporters trying to explain everything but he doesn't even know what the hell he's doing. So basically, even this producer kind of like tells him, you know what, just go down and just end it there. Now, for me, I take it more as a metaphoric ending it, as in like him just not pulling the plug on a movie. He just did not finish the movie. And they're like, you know what? I guess this is what it is. But let's just go to the next project. We'll just start over again.
Interesting.
Because it just broke him, and I did like that finale because it's very different from a finale from any other finale of any other movie this type, where you basically kind of see him not succeed at what he did, what he was doing.
You know,
that everything just really did overwhelm.
It's crazy. It's great. I really want to get into the ending. Let's talk about that because, again, so many interpretations. Here's the fact of the matter is this: Fellini has a thing, and every single one of his films. Fellini comes from theater and he comes from like being a journalist. So that's why you see a lot of that in his films. But one of the biggest things is like vaudeville. So you see like vaudeville in Fellini's film. Every single one of them, you see a vaudeville performer. In 8.5, it was the people who were guessing the thoughts. The guy with the top hat who was well, what are you thinking now? And the quote, the asa something kicked off his flashback, right? So you see vaudevillian aspect, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is the sad reality, or like the boring reality about the ending, is that contractually, Fellini had to shoot a promo. He had to shoot a commercial. He had to shoot a trailer for his film. So what we see in the ending is just the footage of his trailer to promote the film. He, in fact, had a different ending already shot.
Oh, wow.
The different ending was going to have to do with him and his wife ending things on a train cart. And that's how the film was going to end. Just kind of to put a pin in things of like, you know, it didn't work out. Same kind of concept, right, Yoko? At least interpretation. For your
in a way.
So, and then he shot the footage and he was so impressed. He's like, no, this could be it. This could be the ending. This could really work. One of the interpretations that I like to like really feed into is that when I first saw this film, the ending is what sticks with you. Like to me, what stuck with me, right? How the fuck is this circus of a scene mean anything? How does it mean anything, right? The fact of the matter is, my interpretation, one of the interpretations I feel comfortable with is when he shot himself, it was Guido shooting his ego.
Oh.
It was the director shooting his ego. And when he finally joins the craziness, he's not trying to control it anymore. He's just going to be part of the process. He's giving in to the process. He's not going to try to be the dictator, the god, if you will, of his world. He's just going to give into it and see what happens. And I like to think of it in that kind of like progression. He kills his ego and he's finally happy about what's going on around him. He takes his wife's hand, he gets in the line, and that's it. That's all we get. That's all that matters. Whether the film was made or not, the process of being a creative, you just got to feed into it. You just got to like nice. Do it and we do it again, right?
Nice.
I also saw the kind of parallels because every character that's supposed to be in the circus is like people that he's interacted with or been a part of and all that. And I don't know, in a way I was kind of seeing it as it's that glimpse of all of his thoughts kind of running free after he shot himself. Sure. That basically the characters were always the ones that had been around him. The story was always his own and what it was going on around him. And it's just kind of like letting things kind of go, like you said, it's finally him being happy, but it's almost like letting just like the creation run free because now nobody can stop him now that he's dead, in my opinion. But you know.
I mean, it's like you said, right? Like you gotta kind of have to let that beast go. The thing about it too is the paparazzi stuff. By the way, I don't know if you guys know this, but fun fact: the word paparazzi is coined by Fellini Film.
Coined it, yeah.
In the film La Dolce Vita, the journalist, the paparazzo, right? That's the word. That's where it comes from. It's coined from the film, the paparazzi. It came from a Fellini film. You know, so the idea of paparazzi, especially in American pop culture, right? Like that don't leave celebrities alone. This was something he was exploring because he was a journalist. And then he became on the other side of that thing, and this famous filmmaker.
It's also coming at that time when cinema was being, and I wanted to kind of dive into the topic a little bit. Cinema was being appreciated as like an art form, you know, that it was going much more than just a nickel attraction or something like that. And these are kind of the films that validated it as being its own kind of art form and all that.
The French, the Italian, and the Germans made cinema a serious art form.
Yeah.
Because and we see this in like documentary cinema, Castro and Del, I don't know if you guys remember, like that's one of the things they taught us is like the French especially were being introspective. They were going to cafes, smoking cigarettes and talking about the films they saw. And that's what created this want and need of like almost like an aristocratic film movement, right? Like it's serious and it can be serious and it can be introspective and it can be, you know, creative. So it really, we have those people to kind of think. They loved American cinema, but they hate Americans. You know, they love what American cinema became, but they hate Americans because we're this like culture that everybody gets what they want and they don't really take anything seriously. Yeah. What's the line below? We value nothing. We worship everything and value nothing. Yeah. You know, so it really, you're absolutely right. It was that era of filmmakers and film critics that like made cinema a serious art form. Yeah.
You know, more than talking about the film, it's what it kind of tells us a little bit about the culture that we have this weird culture that is focused on the audience and what celebrities are interacting with other celebrities because
Right.
now we view them as like gods, and the way that now we want to understand more of that because we're all collectively having this entertainment experience.
Yeah.
It's very the meta, it feels very introspective, which it's probably supposed to. It's meant to kind of make you look at like
yourself.
But-
Like cinema,
yeah,
a lot most filmmakers, especially filmmakers who make these types of films,
Castro, are you okay?
they see cinema
I
as
love
a
it. I
mirror.
love it. I love it.
They see cinema as a mirror. They see their films as a mirror. They want their films to be mirrors. That's it. That's all they want their films to be, so that the audience can look at it and maybe see themselves in it. And that's it. And kind of look at themselves internally and stuff like that. What's going through your head, Castro?
A great perfect kind of.
Oh man, I just can't believe you nerds know so much about a film, man.
We don't know anything. I probably mentioned like maybe one scene
But
after
everything you guys are saying it makes sense. The metaphors are pretty dope, dude.
Okay.
You're gonna say
A
Yoko?
perfect parallel that I would say, like, to explain this time, well, at least at the time of this era when with Fellini, is basically it's what we're experiencing right now with video games.
Oh,
Because at that time with Fellini, like, well, at least with the creation of this movie, we've barely been about like 30 years from when the creation of the talkie.
Yeah.
So it was already time to experiment. We already started the formula. Now let's get crazy. Let's
Yeah,
start.
we know how to
exploring. Let's
consistently
start
make
getting artsy.
audio
Let's start-
synced with.
start,
Yeah.
Exactly. So at this point, we're in the video game era. We're kind of at this point. We've already been 40 years into it.
Yeah.
Now we're getting these introspective games that reflect death, games that reflect love, and these really weird aspects. And like, so that's kind of like the perfect time where this movie has been placed when it was made.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's a revolution of things, and I think that's why I'm so appreciative of filmmakers, like almost like admiring the filmmakers that my heroes admired. You know, like just backtracking. Cinema, I've said this time and time again, it's not that old. Cinema's a little bit over 100 years old. There's and there's already a ton of history and innovation and revolution in cinema in 100 years. Like there's just so much, right? Castro, I'm going to read this excerpt really quick that might make you feel comfortable with the ending, right?
Hopefully,
It says,
give it to me.
It says, the film, this is Scorsese writing, right? He says, the film doesn't have a resolution, which bothered many people. Gore Vidal, if you know who Gore Vidal is, like a political figure who was in charge of the People's Party way back when politics, 70s and shit. Gore Vidal once told me that he said to Fellini, Fred, less dreams next time. You must tell a story. But in 8.5, the lack of resolution is only right because the artistic process doesn't have a resolution either. You just have to keep going. Whether you're compelled to do it again, when you're done, you're compelled to do it again, just like Sisyphus. And as Sisyphus discovered, pushing the boulder up the hill again and again becomes the purpose of your life. So, like, why should there be a resolution in a film about an artist when an artist never has a resolution? We just saw at Eternity's Gate, right? Mm-hmm. And Van Gogh didn't get a resolution until 100 years after his death when people are admiring his art.
Yeah. And you know what? Also in the film, my goodness, the guy shoots himself and he still has to like be a director after he's dead. Like in that whole thing, you know, it goes back to what you were saying. The process never ends. It just changes. The people change. Go to hell, Carlos. Don't pick these films again.
I don't expect. I'm not saying we're going to talk about this again on the podcast, but when you're watching it, it's that quite crazy, like philosophical thing. Like when people read philosophy, and I'm not a big philosophy guy. I don't know half of what they're saying, right? But when people read philosophy, they ask themselves, like, has the book changed or have I changed? Almost, right? Yeah. And I think that when you watch 8.5, it's almost that as a filmmaker. Yeah. Like the more you watch it, the more you're not going to understand it. That's never the point. But you're going to understand more about yourself and the artistic process just by rewatching this film.
I like that.
Yeah, it's just it's insane.
Castro, easy question of the day. Which character and why? Go.
Obviously, Guido. I really like Guido. I just like Yoko said, you just don't care about him.
Yeah, you kind of go through thinking like, why is the world like revolving around this person who doesn't deserve it?
Yeah, you know which one I really liked just for the acting alone was the mistress. From the beginning, she's just funny. Obviously, she gets sick and everything, but I really liked her, man. I really liked a couple of scenes where they're in bed and she's painting the eyebrows, her face. It just gets you like she was perfect for that role at all. I was lost throughout the whole film. Now I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It was just good film. I will say that I appreciated what they're trying to do. Like I didn't know like that then in the '60s, films would make you think like this. I'm so naive.
That's why I said it's ahead of its time. Like exactly. I mean, you don't think about the '60s. Yeah. Do you feel like with artistic films, like if you were to be acting in them, there's a level of freedom? No, it's because I feel like with you as an actor, at least what you've described to us, is that when you get a role, you really put your all into it. Everything goes in there. And a lot of these actors were in the film were like saying like, okay, so what's my part? Like, what do I do and all that? And I feel like in the actual making of the film, they're probably like that. Do you feel like it's something that you just have to kind of like perform without knowing if that's your all or not? Or do you think that you need to understand it to be able to successfully
do you let go of everything in the tank? Do you put everything that you have in the tank into your performance? Or do you have to almost like feather it? Like give only certain...
Like how difficult is that? I guess that's the actor question.
Oh man. How difficult is it to... What do you mean? How difficult is it to like...
I tell you, Castro, in this scene,
give it your all. Like, what do you
Castro, in this scene, your character sees an apple on the table. There's no apple, there's no table. And he screams for he does not know. Action.
Okay.
Do you ask yourself, like, do you just listen to what your director says wholeheartedly, or do you ask yourself a million times, whoa?
At what point?
I'm sorry, I'm stroking out.
Do you know exactly that even though something's abstract? At what point are you ready for that role, or at what point do you trust the director that he knows what the hell he's doing?
I guess my question is, if you were in this film, would you call it, Castro? Would you just be like, fuck it, no, I'm out?
No, with this type of film, I would obviously like have a lot of faith on the director. Like, yeah, obviously you would have to kind of know where he's going at. Like, I know that, like, especially for Fellini, he doesn't really like to tell you, but I guess he would have to tell the actor a little bit, right? What's going on in his head? So,
well, but he doesn't.
Here's my theory.
He does it for this one. Wow.
No, here's my theory.
That's
because
interesting.
I mean, there's this weird type of acting I've seen with, like, I guess in this film and also like in David Lynch's films, that there's this very, you're not meant to be an actor, you're meant to be one of the things that's in front of the camera, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yes.
Where basically where he tells a person like, I want you to go in there and scream for me and then eat the sandwich at the same time. And he doesn't want you to have to think about it. He doesn't want you to have to understand. And the actors, it's like, I can't really give my all because I don't know, is it sad? Is it happy? Is it joyous? But they just hear action, scream, eat sandwich, and then they just go at it. And I feel like, is that something that you could do, or is that it's too much because you don't know where to put your energy, you know?
No, it's something that right there, like once it, like you did it right now, I was going to try to do something. So it's one of those where it's the beauty of it, right? Like, what can you come up with? Mm-hmm. But obviously you want to be directed a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you have no choice, that's where.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Castro, but I feel like there are the directors who give you a ton of motivation, a ton of direction, and you're still going to do it 10 different ways anyways.
Okay.
Right? I mean, look at Fincher, right? Fincher does 100 takes, possibly with very little direction, and he gets 100 different results. And that's what he wanted in the first place, right? It's just for the actor to feel it and do it his own way. And then I chose you as an actor because I trusted you could play the role, period. That's it.
Now, I guess now more than I'm doing this more and more.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards obviously the challenge of getting what the director wants. So obviously if you guys are asking me like, would you be able to give it your all even though the director's not giving you everything? So obviously that's a big ass challenge, but I'm leaning more towards, because back then I used to be like, let me do my own thing, do my own magic.
Yeah.
I kind of see where you're going. We kind of had a conversation with this, but now the more that you do this, it's like, no, these are the words that were written by the director. Like, even if I want to improv a word, No. I want to get it exactly like the director's saying it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The more you
That's
do this,
interesting
you start
evolution.
falling in love with the craft, and then you start seeing how everybody has their own craft, their own.
I mean, there's a special kind of understanding of knowing how and when to improvise, because I think there's something that's organic about that and really plays into like the film being good.
Yeah.
And then knowing I need to stand back a little bit because obviously this line means something and needs to be performed like this way. You know?
So I gotta ask Carlos. I know we're getting a little bit. So what did the director tell this guy?
What is the director? Are you talking about? Are you talking about Marcello, who plays Guido? Or the actors in the film? What do you mean? Like
no, for well, both of them.
I think because it's so meta, right? It's the same. You're talking about the same thing. I think he tells Marcello, number one, he's worked with Marcello before. Marcello Mastroianni. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Marcello Mastroianni was the lead in La Dolce Vita for Fellini. So he's worked with him before, kind of worked with him a couple times after. So he kind of knew him. He had a relationship with him. But from what I understand, he was very trusting of Fellini. Everybody was at that time, right? It's like having...
Well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So he was very trusting of him. All he knew was like almost like to play the pompous director. And the pompous director is going to be thrown in every scenario. How is the pompous director going to react to this scenario? Right?
Okay, that's a lot of direction.
We're supposed to throw Guido gets thrown into areas of his life that are supposed to make him vulnerable, and he's still not vulnerable in these areas, right? So it's almost like I don't want to break down for anything. I didn't break down for my past. My art allowed me to reconcile with my past, and my present isn't a result of my past. It's just another thing on the line that I have to deal with, right? So as a director, if I put myself in the director headspace from Guido's perspective and from Fellini's perspective, like I always tell you guys this on set, like something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Something is going to go wrong. Expect it because it will.
Going with that mentality. Yeah.
So that way, when it does, it doesn't shock you anymore. This is the thing that you now have to deal with, right? And I think Guido is presenting that facade because if he doesn't, his life is over. You know, his life as a filmmaker, his life as a creative, his life as the leader of his family, as the leader of his tribe, the film crew, it's over if he takes off the mask. If he makes himself vulnerable, people will now see him as vulnerable. People will now see his films as vulnerable. So he can't be vulnerable with anybody. Not even in a fantasy can he be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I like to think of it like that's the direction Fellini probably was going for. But, you know, I don't know.
That's heavy.
I don't know. I mean, you know. So anyways, I do want to kind of just say I'm kind of happy that you guys were able to interpret it at least in one way or another, because very easily, I mean, if I show this to like, you know,
Sandra,
people don't care. They're just going to watch it for what it is. And like on the very surface level, like, I didn't get it. Well, you know, like, what about it? You know?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you guys were able to interpret it because that makes me feel like I can show you other Fellini films that are definitely not as heavy as 8.5.
Yeah.
And you're going to get the central theme because you know that 8.5 had a million central themes, all kind of covered into one big central theme of the insecurities of an artist.
Yeah.
But like the central theme of La Strada, which is like freedom and happiness, and like La Dolce Vita of like fantasy, and like almost La Dolce Vita has this like Sunset Boulevard feel where there's a tragedy because of obsession, you know? So stuff like that. Like you guys are going to get these basic central themes because 8.5 has now blown your mind. And like nothing's going to blow your mind like 8.5, at least from Fellini, you know? And by the way, before people start thinking that Fellini's like this pretentious prick, if you see an interview with him, he doesn't take himself that seriously.
But he's a little bit full of himself.
He's a little full of himself, but they ask him like, can I compare you to this guy? Or can I compare you to this? I don't want you to compare me to anybody, man. I'm just a filmmaker. Cool. This is what the film is. And
I mean,
he's a terrorist.
He's not a total Shyamalan.
Hey man, it works for him, man. It works for him.
Hey, you know, but no, I do like he doesn't take himself seriously. Like in his eyes, he's just another Italian filmmaker. He's just another Italian storyteller. That's it. You know?
Are you like that, Carlos? Where what I was saying earlier with what he said in the interview, where he doesn't like to interpret things. Like once he does the film, it's his own creature. Don't ask me about it.
No, I mean, I think I like to discuss what I was going for,
You would
but
think, yeah.
but I do want my films to be self-reflective. Like
To
I do
live their
want,
own life.
yeah, to have their own lives, and for people, they don't live inside me anymore. They live inside people now. Hopefully, they live inside people now.
So this is what I wanted to ask. Like, you know how many directors don't think they ever make it or whatever? Do you think they make it once they like to watch their film?
Ooh, no.
Once they like, oh, you know what? I like it. Like,
I don't because
because like me with acting, it's like the same thing. It's like once I like that's when I think I could jump off.
I don't know, man. I'm definitely not nowhere near there yet because come on, we're still trying to make it.
That's
right?
what I think too, exactly.
But we're still trying to make it. Like Sanchez actually put this in my head a lot. Like I remember a while back, man, I made a film I wasn't proud of, you know, and like right after making it, I kind of not regretted it, but I just wasn't happy with it.
It was his wedding video.
It was my way, yeah. And I wanted to give up. I remember telling my filmmaker friends, like, I'm done, man. Like, maybe I'll write, but I'm not going to direct anymore. I'm done with this. Like, I can't do this anymore. This isn't me. I'm not good at this. And like, I remember like Austin and Eric, like Eric said something really pivotal in my brain. Like he said, dude, you just started, like you're not there. You're nowhere near that yet. These are the times you're supposed to mess up. You know, if you're not happy with it, then do something that you're going to be happy with, you know? And I had a lot of friends like that were filmmakers that like texted me and were like, what the fuck are you thinking? Like, no, we're barely here. We're barely at the starting line. Like, yeah. So I don't know, man. I think I want to be happy with the films I make, but let's face it. I revisit a film, you know, a year or 2 years after, and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking, dude?
Yeah.
Like to the point where it's pretty public that like, I don't want anybody to watch Depth of Field, man. I don't. And that's the reason we don't want to release it. I don't want anybody to see that movie. It's no, like I don't.
I feel you, dude.
And it's not bad. Like everybody that's seen it they're happy with how it came out and we're happy with what we did. But I don't want anybody to see. I don't want that to be my first feature on my MD. You know what I mean? Like I don't want people to see that. Yeah. Like, that was the first thing, you know. Yeah, especially when you see these guys and you see their first film, and their first films are fucking amazing, and you're just sitting with your dick in your hand, like.
Like you said, man, we're supposed to get into the craft.
Anyways, we got another segment to get into, but yeah, sorry.
No, I'm just gonna close it off like this. I didn't really come into filmmaking as my big artistic expression, like right now. It's the only medium I really want to dive into. But I remember before this, I was into photography and I was into painting, and I would do a lot of like abstracts and all that. And I know a lot of the feeling of making a painting that after it's done, it's colors and it's molding of shapes. And I like when you're doing it, you understand the feeling that goes into it, and you understand that moment, and that becomes a very personal thing. But then once it's out there, honestly, if people are like, I think it's this, or I think it's that, or like, oh, it makes me feel this way, there's a part of you that doesn't really care because it's not meant to be your like a collective experience. This is meant to be yours. And that's what art does. Art, it is something that once it's out there, like a statue, look at a statue out in like, I was gonna say the wild, like they're roaming, but no. Like, look at a statue that's like in front of, let's say a building or something like that. The artist is not standing there day and night waiting for you to like ask him, why did you make it that way? He leaves it there, and if people have their experience.
And if he or she they probably never finished the art.
Yeah.
So that's the whole struggle.
With films like these, I feel like I'm not trying to go and talk to the director and ask. Like with film, we want to do that because there's so many stories that are like that. Mm-hmm. But at this point, it's kind of like, no, my experience was making the film, writing the film, and all that. Like Fellini, like I did this.
Yeah.
But this is not meant to be my experience anymore. This is meant to be your experience. Watch it. Like that's it. Yeah.
As a filmmaker,
that's George Lucas though.
Oh my gosh. I want to emulate that. Even Lucas, though. Lucas was inspired by these guys and by Akira Kurosawa and George Lucas had his fill of like cinema.
A lot.
Look, this is the last thing I'm going to say in regards to this, because I know Yoko's got a very cool background to get into, but I want to emulate whatever that feeling is. Like I've always said, whenever I make a film, I'm trying to capture a feeling, and hopefully I successfully capture it to where what feeling I experience. And when I capture the feeling, it's now in the vault, right? It's now I have it. I've trapped the firefly. When I re-release it into the world, I want the world to see what I saw. And whether they like it or they don't, that's their business. Whether they connect with it or they don't, that's their business. But I want them to feel something, whatever that something is. I don't care, something, right? So I want to emulate guys like Scorsese and Fellini because they breathe cinema. It's in their breath. It's in their veins. But they don't, in my personal opinion, it's not overwhelming to the point where they take themselves too seriously.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. You hear interviews with these guys, they're pretty laid back. They're very smart and knowledgeable, but they're not pretentious. If it's one thing they're not pretentious. So I want to emulate that as a filmmaker. I want to live and breathe cinema much so that I have to do it. I have to make it, right? And let me just say this about Fellini. Fellini loved
5 seconds.
and lived cinema so much that when he died, his funeral was at stage 5 of Cinecittà, which was the famous Italian. It's like their Universal, basically. And stage 5 was his stage, his sound stage. And his funeral, literally his body, that's where it was honored. That's where his funeral service was held. How much more
that is cool, man.
You know what I mean? Like, how much more can you get? I don't know. So yeah, just that's all I'm gonna say. These are the guys who I can't spend 100 days talking to them because they're not gonna give a shit. Like they've released their film.
Yeah.
They don't care what questions you have for them, but every question you need to ask yourself about these filmmakers and these films is answered by you and you yourself about what you thought. And that's it, man. That's what I want to emulate.
That's heavy, ladies and gentlemen.
It's about that time, though.
It's about that time.
Yokomoto.
What? It's about that time?
It's about that time, though.
Ooh. Oh, well. So welcome to the Tower Crown, people.
Yes.
So this time, we were talking about Fellini, right? About the masterworks of Federico Fellini.
Italiano.
So I delved in this time thinking, let's see, what other classic iconic directors are there? And let's see what the audience thinks was their favorite one. So for the poll this time, I put on, let's remember them.
Number 1.
Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, right off the bat.
Unapologetically.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Damn. Strong second.
Charlie Chaplin.
My fave, dude. My favorite.
And Akira Kurosawa.
Easy pick.
The master.
That deserves an ovation right there, man. Right there.
So we put up the poll, the people decide, and
damn you, Yoko. We could do a whole episode of
every single one of these directors have masterpieces in their works.
Yes.
But no, we can't do that. At this point, we have to go with 2 people. And these are Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick.
Kubrick.
You see, kind of, that's the only way, because that's kind of
man.
They are true icons. And people there's a reason why almost everybody unanimously voted for either one of these.
Yeah, because you hear either name and the only idea that comes to mind is master. It's just for better or for worse. For better or for worse,
pedestal,
true masters.
I don't think I don't know if I don't have Kubrick's criterions, but we got Notorious by Hitchcock. We got Dreams by Akira Kurosawa. We have The Kid from Charlie Chaplin.
Do you have Birdemic?
I have the 4K,
The Shining. There we go.
The
2001, of course.
Or DVD, but eventually it'll be something more. And the 35.
My favorite.
My goodness.
My absolute favorite. That one for sure. Yeah. All right. So how are we doing this, fellas?
All right. So I know that Alfred Hitchcock, Carlos, you wanted to take Alfred Hitchcock, right?
I want to take Hitchcock. I think
you're taking Freddie Boy? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't mind backing up my man Kubrick.
And you're doing Kubrick.
Who's also on my side? No one.
I think Oslo.
I'm also definitely on the. Well, the thing is that I
moderate.
love both of these guys, like,
Castro is
but I
moderating,
don't know.
so I like
You're
this. I think
moderating,
this is-
Castro.
I think
Oh,
this
wow.
is the first time that Castro is ever going to have the nail in the coffin, the final
Yeah.
word.
I'm just gonna say
At
right
least for
now,
a while. It's been a
Kubrick is
while.
ahead with 1 point. Okay, I
Damn.
gotta say it. I gotta say it.
You gotta keep that in.
It's under the question marked. Who
I
rhymes
have-
more with Schmoobrick? You know.
I have my work cut out for me because I know more people prefer Kubrick on that. More people who are modernists with cinema really admire Kubrick. I mean, contemporary, yeah. But if you're a classic nuthead like me, you love Hitchcock and you love what he offered and what he brought to the table. So
I don't know that. Then again, that's what it's supposed to be. That's why we're here to debate for.
yeah. All right. Let's do this. The La Gangster, you wanna open it up?
Yeah, I'll open it up by saying this. He's Kubrick, one and done.
Damn,
Break
dude.
me now, coach.
Point.
Okay. Kubrick, I think, was at a level that obviously there was just so much potential in his work having cinematic value from him needing to create a new lens to get certain aesthetics and challenging himself to play with only natural light to him taking a story that was already written but making it into something that can be deemed a classic like The Shining and a cinematic masterpiece. But also being able to dab into things that were much more experimental and to a lot of people ahead of their time, like 2001 Space Odyssey, that when it first premiered, it was, I forgot exactly what it's called, but it was this CinemaScope kind of thing where there were screens on the side that were projecting the environment, and he was trying to create a movie that put you in the capsule with the people while you were watching it. And also, Clockwork Orange, like we just mentioned, it's one of those films that, as experimental as it is, as kind of like abstract and obscure as the idea may be, it's only his touch that could have made it be taken like seriously and professionally. I mean, and when you talk about a great director, you're talking about great directing towards actors. And I mean, out of each of these films, you're seeing performances that are masterful, performances that make people's careers, and performances that everybody iconicizes because you want to be able to, if you're an actor, you want to do performances like that. And if you're a director, you're hoping that you could possibly get that out of somebody one day,
Quick. What did you think about the 2001 character? Was that a big character?
Now, here's the thing. When you think about these characters in their films individually, right?
Pointless to the plot.
No, it's because they all, except for that one.
No, but
I want to
but if you think about him and you think about I don't want to even get into the whole meta of him being just like one point in like a sea of time, but if you think about him, it's the subtleties and what he needed to play for that role, that kind of like the man being stuck in the spaceship, and as much as he wants to be the man who's in control, the man who says, I'll try to be home as soon as I can, dear, he's also just kind of thrown into this whirlwind of things, and he's fighting with a machine that was created by man. Like, I mean, it's just
okay, good, strong finish. Go for it.
Yeah. So that's where I'll leave it as far as my Kubrick opener. I think that's a fair amount.
Strong first round. Let's go, Carlos.
Okay.
All right.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Well, the two things these two have in common is that they were pretty big dicks to their actors. No, they both have a reputation of it. No, but anyways, I look. Here's the thing about Hitchcock. Number one,
Isn't Hitchcock crazier? Didn't he have like a secret inside kid to go peek on his actresses?
what?
Alfred Hitchcock.
I heard that one.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
maybe. I mean, I wouldn't.
My bad. Go for it.
It's Hitchcock. It's Hitchcock, but here's the thing. Kubrick, in all of his greatness, was inspired by Hitchcock. Hitchcock was an inspiration to Kubrick. Okay, Hitchcock came before him, right? And look, here's what I love about Alfred Hitchcock. You can talk about his legacy all you want, but the thing about Hitchcock that I really admire the most is that he was supposed to fail. He was put up to fail. Alfred Hitchcock started in silent pictures, and he's one of the only filmmakers that successfully transitioned into talkies. There's very few filmmakers that did that. Very, very few. Charlie Chaplin wasn't even one of them. Limelight and The Great Dictator. I mean, they're popular because of Chaplin, not because they're good films.
Yeah.
So most directors didn't succeed in that front, but Hitchcock came from the silent pictures and quite frankly took over the talkies. You know, a guy that wasn't supposed to survive, a guy that was set up to fail almost, right?
Talk about his style.
The master of suspense, right? That's what everybody knows as a master. That's what everybody, he's the master of suspense. He knows exactly what type of picture he's telling, whether it's North by Northwest or it's a rear window, or he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. If he's going to make a horror, who can make a horror picture with birds? Nobody can make a horror picture with birds but Hitchcock.
Birdemic.
Yeah.
It's the bird. Nobody could do it. I don't think Stanley Kubrick could do it.
Oh,
No.
what?
Only Hitchcock.
What about aliens?
No, but that's not a horror film. I mean, who can make a horror film with birds and make it so compelling and you feel for this woman walking around and getting into telephone booths, and who could do it? I mean, number one. Number two,
Stephen King.
can we all agree that Alfred Hitchcock single-handedly inspired the horror genre with Psycho without even trying? I mean, Psycho inspired the likes of stuff that Kubrick was going for with The Shining. If you don't think that Psycho inspired The Shining, I mean, come on, directly almost inspired The Shining. That feel, that tone, that he was going for, it inspired filmmakers after him. And what's more, it inspired in different genres. He wasn't just doing thrillers. He was doing love pieces like Notorious, you know, with Ingrid Bergman. He was doing genre pieces and fun little detective stories, and he was doing everything and inspiring everybody in his path after that. And what I love, again, about Hitchcock is Hitchcock didn't take himself very seriously. You see interviews with Hitchcock, and he makes fun of everything and everyone, including himself. Was he a prick? Absolutely. But I think...
what do you mean? Because I really don't know about Hitchcock. Was he a prick, but he wasn't...
I mean, he was a prick, like he was the man. He was the man to follow, and he was the man to, honor. But he didn't take himself very seriously. He was sarcastic. I think his wife would call him a sarcastic cow. He was just a sarcastic, kind of fun, witty guy. He was a character in and of himself, and somebody said this, I read this earlier, where he said, he just happens to be a creative genius. He's the normal, fun-loving, witty dude who just happens to be a creative genius. I don't think there's a filmmaker post 1940s, 1950s that inspired the way Hitchcock did. Hitchcock, I feel like, was one of the first dominoes, if not the first domino, to inspire.
Who was around his time? Like, I'm not competing, but like...
No, I mean, he was around the time of guys like Fellini. He was around the times of these revolution kind of, but that's the beauty of him. He was all the way from Chaplin to, I think his last picture was in 1970 something. Let's see, he died in 1980. Yeah, I think he directed up until like the year before he died or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So think about the era, think about the generations so he was up against everybody, dude. He was up against the Chaplins. He was up against I mean, not as far back as D.W. Griffith, right? But he was up against the Fellinis, and he was up against even the Scorseses, and he was up against them. Like he was up against everybody, and everybody at the end of the day honored him.
Okay. Give me some more.
Yes. No, inspiration to the children indeed. But here's what I must say. I think we've all agreed that in film, the goal is never to, like, we revere and honor those who came before us, but we want to do better than them. If I tried to make any film that, like a silent era film back in the day with like that technology, it'd feel like, yes, you're honoring them, but you're not doing anything with the medium. And I mean, as though Kubrick was inspired, he's doing something with the medium to push it forward. And I mean, taking you're talking about somebody who, created masterful films that inspired somebody who can now take all that knowledge and add his own into it and add his own innovation and utilize the technology at the time to push the era forward, to push the medium forward. I mean, they say that there's so many scenes in like 2001 Space Odyssey that you can see parallels of or being parodied in current like modern cinema, just like Hitchcock. But I mean, it shows you that he is the embodiment of taking everything that was laid as a foundation before you, so you can then improve and go beyond.
But you know what I love, and that's fine, and that's true. I think on the technical front, I think Kubrick as a storyteller was pushing the medium forward. However, I think Hitchcock was still creating it. I think Hitchcock was in its early founding father stages of cinema, where he got to determine where it went and what it was going to be with no resources. And I love directors that don't need all the bells and whistles and end up developing their own bells and whistles. If it's going to be forced perspective, or if it's going to be, any storytelling tool as a director, Hitchcock jumped the rope with that line, because he created it. And I think he was at a point where cinema, again, from talkies and on, he was creating the art form almost, like for other people to grab that foundation. And what's more, he was doing it more successfully than anybody else, even up until his death.
Well, I got
just one little. I just want to integrate one little thing. So, Kubrick always mentioned. Apparently, he's been like, he doesn't like a lot of Hitchcock films. He likes in others, but he's never like really been. He never said that he was influenced by him. No, nothing.
Oh, okay.
Because he's actually been more on the Fritz Lang, which is director of. But he was never stated to be influenced by Hitchcock or anything like that.
I like that.
Or even his style.
Keeping it to himself.
I have to disagree there, especially because when Kubrick started in the studio system, and sure, he was influenced by European filmmakers, as was everybody kind of in that generation, especially Kubrick, who his most successful.
He is British, so
but his most successful, both of them were, but they were making films. Kubrick was making films in that free-forming generational gap of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. His most successful films happened in that era, right? Whereas what I'm trying to say with Hitchcock, let me put it to you this way. If he didn't directly inspire Kubrick, he inspired a filmmaker that Kubrick loved. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of the power that Hitchcock really had.
But I mean, that's like the power that we're seeing now with like Kubrick and what he's inspiring, the imagery, the like potential for the medium, And I mean, we're even talking about like guys like Ari Aster, who, the amount of inspirations behind them and the amount of like foundation that's been laid up before them. Right. It almost, I think every era in film, we almost feel like it can't get any better, and it's a weird way of kind of saying like the technology improves, the programs improve, the methodology and acting. I mean, now that we're going into film school, we're able to see these masterpieces from like generations, where then now we're culminated to like push the medium forward. And every time you think that the ceiling can't be broken, like it is, and it's people like Kubrick that are breaking that next step, that then we're able to see things like Ari Aster break those next step, where then hopefully we can see our generation grow to break more steps, Yeah.
No, yeah. I think Kubrick has has a lot to offer to cinema, even nowadays. But I think Hitchcock set up the ability to almost be a chameleon in cinema, where you don't have to adhere to one genre, you don't have to adhere to one actor, one location, or one setting, or one camera technique. I mean, Hitchcock invented camera techniques that we still use today. I mean, his high angle shot is one of the most legendary shots that we still use today.
Recommended a lens.
The vertigo effect. The vertigo effect. I mean, the vertigo effect. Watch Vertigo. I mean, that's what popularized the vertigo effect. Also a great picture, by the way. But I just think Hitchcock offered a foundation for cinema that Kubrick then laid upon. And
Okay.
The foundation is what's strong, man.
this is kind of a weird question, but I guess they both had strong kind of like starts, and who had the better finish? Who had like the better?
I still think Hitchcock. I'm going to argue that Hitchcock because Kubrick in his ending days was kind of pawning on. I mean, the reason we have AI is because of Kubrick kind of starting to let go of his. Kubrick's last picture was Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut, yeah.
Right, is Eyes Wide Shut, and it wasn't ending his career with a bang. Correct me if I'm wrong. In fact, it's probably his least recognized picture, as far as I'm concerned.
I would think.
So he
in a way it is, but so right now it's kind of we're entering the era where there's a lot of people that are actually looking more at that movie because it did come out in '99.
Rediscovering it with the likes of Kubrick. I mean, with the likes of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, right? So people don't even believe that's a Kubrick film, almost, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Yoko. I've been wanting to watch it. I've only seen like various scenes from it, but I've been wanting to rediscover it. Hitchcock's last film was Family Plot, one of his most famous ever. Family Plot was
never heard of it.
Never heard of Family Plot?
Nope.
1976, and it's based on a novel, but it's got Bruce Dern in it, and it's got
I like that.
What's her name? Karen something.
Eyes Wide Shut wasn't based off of a novel. It all came from here.
Wasn't it? No, but it's if you see the poster for Family Plot, you even see Hitchcock winking like he's the head in the bubble of
look it up now.
Yeah, look it up. It's a genius poster, and it's like
it is
clairvoyancy type of film. But anyways, Family Plot inspired a lot of filmmakers. James Gunn all the time talks about Family Plot, and like Jordan Peele and like all these guys, like they talk about Family Plot a lot. It's a big deal. It ended his career with a bang. He died only 4 years later. Wow. 4 years after the final film, and I think. Again, Eyes Wide Shut is starting to get a kind of a cult following again, but I don't know that it ended his career with a bang. That's my argument. I don't know. Lau, you might have some more insight.
Well, close it.
Died the year it came out. Up till the final instance, this man poured his heart and soul into film. And I mean, though not recognized at the time, it is something that every one of his films can now be put into a collection and curated and offer future inspiration. Nah, man, I'm fucked. But it's fine.
I was like, bro.
Nah, dude, I mean, look, I think if I'm not mistaken, he made his last picture in like 81. And then obviously Steven Spielberg took over AI, and he was kind of working with Steven to get that film made. But he was he kind of hung the towel up early, I think. He was kind of done. He was kind of done.
Well, no, not really. The thing is, one thing so the thing with these two directors is that you have two very different directors. One where you could see more on the populist side, and he's one of those that will churn out movies quicker because he's developing ideas quicker. He has several. He knows what he's looking for in a way that okay, I got this twist. I got you. I'm gonna see how I'm gonna build up to that.
It's a very studio system type of mentality that he came up with.
Yeah, that's with Hitchcock. And now with Kubrick, he's more of a perfectionist angle. Yeah. So he took years to make a movie because at the same time he wasn't focused on that twist. Yeah. He was focused on the full picture. Every single frame was a painting for him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Why I win with the help of Yoko.
Well, I mean, I put both of them.
No, they both have their. That's true, man. Imagine being a director and you can push films out, not just films, good films. You can push out things that are going to later be known as masterpieces. If you do 2 a year, whereas Kubrick would probably do, one every 5 years or whatever.
He would redefine cinema when he did it.
Well, that's what I mean. That's a good thing. That's what I'm saying. Like, I agree with you, Yokomoto. Like, imagine being either director. That's the dream, right? Either one. I'll take either one at this point, dude. Like, yeah.
Now, Hitchcock did revolutionize the whole idea of the Chekhov's gun.
That's go to hell.
And if you haven't seen the Kuleshov effect by Hitchcock, he revolutionized the Kuleshov effect too.
Stop it.
You know, the Kuleshov effect. Just go to YouTube.
Castro, I like how you're not even looking at me because you know.
Oh, I already sent the winner.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm just.
Kuleshov. No, but it's funny. It is a funny video, and it teaches you about filmmaking. The Kuleshov effect. YouTube. It's pretty cool. Anyways,
how do you spell it?
K-U Shalaf.
K-U-L Kuleshov.
K-U-L-I.
Versace.
I don't know. Google it.
All right.
Versace.
So I'm gathering the tally over here from Castro. He's sending it over.
Tally.
And any final thought, Castro? No, nothing. Okay, that's what I meant. Okay, so here it is.
He'll explain his thoughts after the winners. You know?
Yeah.
I know. So the winner was.
Hitchcock! Yes!
I pick Alfred Hitchcock because obviously I'm biased because I like Kubrick for sure.
Yeah, you like Kubrick more. Yeah.
Next time you moderate, just slap me in the face. It'll hurt less. I swear.
Hey, Bilal, you and I have been going at it, bro. Like back
dude.
You've been winning one. I've been winning.
I've been trying.
Not bad.
You both got a good one there.
No, yeah, but ultimately, I guess like I like Kubrick also because he changed the game where certain lenses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Experimental. But it all boils down to like the teacher, or how you call it, the master and the student, or how would you say it?
No.
Yeah.
The student becomes a master, or like
Yeah, exactly. Like I always hate to compare basketball and stuff like that, but it's like Michael and Kobe, right? It's just like Kobe's good too. Kobe's Kobe, but Michael, everybody,
foundation, yeah,
the foundation.
That's good. That's a good analogy.
And like they're always saying, he made it better, right? Kobe made certain moves better. He used the three more. I hate comparing this, but same thing with Kubrick, right? He didn't make as many films like you were saying, but he was very detailed because what he learned from his master and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And they're two different types of players, Kobe and Michael. Like, that's exactly the point. Yeah.
Like I could go into that for another hour, but yeah. Another thing is that the overall, like how Carlos said that Alfred Hitchcock was a chameleon, or he set himself up to be a chameleon, where he could pick whatever he could write about or film about, and also how he developed the studio mentality and had more ideas. But yeah, I mean,
I love it, man. I love Kubrick. I seriously, man. Like,
did I help at all in any situation?
What the hell, Kubrick?
No, yeah, for sure.
Kubrick is I mean, Clockwork Orange is one of my favorite films, literally, and Full Metal Jacket I think is one of my favorite films of his. It's very underrated, I think. But Hitchcock is. When you think of cinema, you think of Hitchcock. You think of his bald little head and the silhouette. I mean, you think of Hitchcock. And
he was good at promoting himself.
He's damn good at promoting himself, absolutely. But what I love about Hitchcock is much of my favorite directors, they made the studio system their bitch. They weren't adhering to the cookie cutter things. They were making their own cookie cutters. You know what I mean? They were making their own cookie shapes so that future filmmakers could copy them. But they weren't going to do the cookie cutter stuff of the studio. They made the studio their bitch. When you go to Universal in California and you go to the Universal backlot tour, the first thing you see on the tram is Hitchcock's face talking to you about Universal Studios. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's just this thing, dude. It's just this history of cinema. I love it. But I love Kubrick too. That's not to say Kubrick's fantastic.
Carlos had the better argument, but I like Kubrick more, man. I like how he was weird.
That's what I feel like right now. Like, I think if you ask people to go and appreciate, like, let's say early 1920s cinema, it's hard for them because it's so different. It feels so minimalistic and not in like the best ways. It feels like it's limited and it's a different era. But then if they watch stuff now and they think like, oh, it's crazy good, like Ari Aster stuff. Yeah. It's stuff that without those fundamental players, they wouldn't be there, Without Hitchcock, people like Jordan Peele wouldn't be, able to revitalize the genre now, And
let's just throw it this way. Let's just put it this way. If there was a Mount Rushmore of film directors, these two would be on it. It doesn't matter who you are. These two would be on it.
And Wes Anderson. He'd be like an awkward kind of like
like a rock formation of.
By the way,
North by Northwest. Awesome scene, takes place in Mount Rushmore. Just FYI.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Wes Anderson made a film. It's called Rushmore.
Hey, you did. That's true.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. Like we can talk about that later. But at the very least, these two filmmakers would be on the Mount Rushmore of directors. No matter who you are, like they would be on.
Yeah.
What about Fellini? Ooh, so
Fellini
next time,
would be on
folks.
He'd be on like an awkward foreign section, you know.
He'd be on mine. But
He'd be like with Kurosawa and everybody that Americans like should know but don't know because we're Americans and it's bad. Yeah.
Any final thoughts, guys, on this or on 8.5 or anything?
If you are not a film person, if you just kind of go and watch movies casually, which if you're listening to the show, you probably don't, but if you are, I'd say it'd be very interesting to just experience 8.5, and
yes.
whether you don't understand it, don't get it, you don't understand any of what we've talked about,
try to understand it. That's the beauty.
Look at it as a film that was meant to. It's kind of gonna sound weird, but I think look at it as a film that was meant for you, and meaning if you hated it, it was made so you could hate it, or if it was made.
I don't know if anybody's ever said this, and if they didn't, I'm coining it on this podcast. Cinema's not always about understanding, but it is always about experience.
Yes. Oh, nice.
So.
Whether you experience nothing or everything at all.
Yes, go in and just feel it. Even if you hate it, and there's something that needs to be said about the fact that art, and we're talking about cinema mainly because that's what we appreciate, but art, if it's done well, will make you feel something, and this made us feel something. Not unanimously, not understandably or collectively, but it made us feel something, and that's why we think it's good, and that's why we can have an hour, 45-minute conversation about it.
I know.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my thought.
And we could go on. I know we can, but anyways, yeah. Yoko, any final thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Like, first of all, if you are listening to the podcast, obviously you do like films. So whether I fall right in the middle of this movie, but it is one of those movies that if you are interested in film, give it a watch. Put that in your bucket list.
Yeah. And then go to your cool film friends and make fun of them because they don't know what the film is.
Yeah.
Then after you can even watch the musical 9 after. Yeah, it's a more streamlined version. So if you don't get a lot of stuff that goes on in this movie, at least there it's kind of like they explicitly tell you what's going on.
I'm literally looking for the Blu-ray as we speak, Yoko. Like I want to get 9 into the.
It's interesting. It's an interesting thing, like to compare one to another. But yeah, still watch it. There are some really interesting things that were experimental at the time that we now take for granted.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, beautiful guys. Thank you guys for allowing me to choose this picture. Thank you for giving it a shot. I'm happy that it's something we were able to talk about and not just brush off as this weird 60s Italian picture, but something that really redefined cinema and inspired so many people and you connect to it as an artist. So I appreciate you guys listening to this and listening to me babble about Fellini and his genius and stuff. So thank you guys for letting me choose this pick. Next pick, Gaspar, are we allowed to announce, or are you still flirting with both of them?
Yeah, no, yeah, we're still flirting with it.
Okay,
but Gaspar is up next to bat for the pick. So that's the preview.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You're next in line either way. Like that's why we kind of don't know what to say.
You can also bat if you want.
Yeah, you can bet too. No, but it's not hard to follow 8.5. It is like in cinema world, but whatever you pick after this, Gaspar, will either be a breath of fresh air of like, oh man, that was too much to think about, or it's gonna be like, let's add on this layer, right? But it's good, man. So Castro's got the next pick. It's gonna be a great film that we're gonna talk to you about. If you have any suggestions, send us a message, man. Send us a message to either the WatchTower Podcast or the WatchTower Network on Instagram or Tower Productions on Facebook, or you can message In the Mind of Yoko for any cool Poe ideas. And thank you guys for listening in, man. We appreciate you film nerds out there, and thank you for geeking out with us on this episode of the WatchTower Podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.
Take care, everybody.
You guys. Love you guys.